So, welcome everybody from around the world who is joining us on Simplifying AI, the global panel discussion. Um, we have our experts on board, and we will be talking about how we are going to simplify AI, how they are in their world looking at simplification of AI. AI has become a thing of very very complex that people identify only with complex mathematics or engineering, and it is kind of exclusive to a lot of people. The senior business leaders are not able to participate in some of the AI discussions because it requires them to understand technology way more than they need to. A lot of people who do not have technological degrees are excluded from this revolution which is happening around us. And we would like to introduce you to our panel first. So our panel, we have Nick Karonas. Nick, you want to say a couple of things, something about you, a couple of minutes, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me to this, Sudeep. It's an important question we need to be answering, the simplification of AI. So I've been in AI for almost 4 decades now, as a researcher, investor, entrepreneur, done it all. That's culminated in a group of companies involved in artificial intelligence research, trying to move AI beyond the current state of the art. So trying to move beyond the periphery, what comes after deep learning? How do we even begin to approach artificial general intelligence? That's the research company. We completely grant funded. We have a consulting and software development company that builds AI applications and consults the companies in the area. And then Foundtech Ventures is our venture building corporate co-founder business, where we look for AI ideas that are innovating both at the technology, at the science level, as well as solving important world problems. And we invest financially as well as rolling up our sleeves and being a true co-founder and helping them get to eventually Series B, which is when we typically bring in other investors.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Couple of quick minutes with Jenny. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Jenny Watkins. So I work in the AI space within the context of helping large organizations adopt and apply AI. So primarily on the strategy side, I spent almost a decade in banking and a variety of different industries before that, insurance, healthcare, so on and so forth. And I worked on digital transformation initiatives about 10 years ago, and since then have really focused more on AI, because in banking we have a ton of data, and so have quite a bit of experience working on machine learning beginning in 2006. So happy to be here. Thank you, Sudeep, for having me.
Thanks, Jenny. Susan, do you want to go next quickly?
Thank you. So I'm Susan Perry. I'm the CEO of SpeechMed. We basically, our goal is to make healthcare understandable to everyone. So there are frequently problems with health literacy in the United States. It's only at about 14% proficiency. And we think that we can save lives by giving people their medical information in the language that they understand and in an audio format. And we've been using, we've been building AI into our software for about 4 years. So I'm kind of outside the box. That was not my intention. My intention was to solve the problem. And we found that AI, helps us solve those problems.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Susan. Theo, you want to go next, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Viorel Teodorescu, and I'm the CEO of WizHero. And here at WizHero, we are working on democratizing sports coaching for people who are at home, don't have time to practice because of price, range restraints, or whatever restraints. And we are, with the help of AI, we have gone beyond just showing a video. We actually coach by embedding the instructor wisdom into our system and then delivering it at scale. Later on, I should be doing a demo of our system. and I look forward to presenting it all to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Theo. Renita, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sudeep. Hello, everyone. I'm Renita Calhorn. I'm an executive coach, and I've worked with over 1,000 clients at this point, all across the spectrum, from corporate leaders to startup entrepreneurs to military special forces. And what I've seen is that people struggle with technology. Either they're trying to get their people to use it, to adopt it, or they're just resisting using it. So I think we're going to have a really important conversation today. I personally love technology, but I don't think everyone in the world today does or likes learning how to adopt it. So I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thanks, Renita. Son, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Sun Vũ from Vietnam, very far away country, right? So maybe some of you know about my country. So I've been in the IT industry for a while. I'm doing the solution consultant for cloud almost the 7 years already in Vietnam. So the very early day with the cloud and the AI technology. So I believe the Vietnam grow very fast and the adoption technology so well. So we have a very high rate of the number adoption mobile technology. So one of the highest country among the ASEAN. I believe in Vietnam the AI we apply a lot, and I also have some of my clients going to apply the success AI, and I hope I can share my experience during the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Son. And Professor Maheshwari?
Yes, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are, like Jenny said. We are a truly global community and hope everybody is safe wherever you are in these times. So I'm a professor of information systems at Maharishi International University. I'm in Fairfield, USA, Iowa. And I've been interested in AI and neural networks for a long time. And my interest also comes from the data side. And I'm author of a couple of textbooks in this side, Big Data and another one on data analytics. First book is already in second edition from McGraw-Hill. The second book is going to come out next year, and second edition is already out there, first edition. And I do have an engineering degree and an MBA and a PhD in information systems. So I will bring that information systems perspective when I present my views on how AI can be adopted more easily. I'm also a practitioner of transcendental meditation technique and TM cities. So I'm very much into consciousness and into world peace, and I'm very interested in how AI can help make the world more peaceful and blissful. So I'm looking forward to speaking later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Anil. And let me introduce myself as well. My name is Sudeep Mathur. I am the founder of Genesis Robotics. I have been a consultant for over 15 years into technology and AI space, and I started off the products company over last 2 years, and we've been trying to help our customers with a simple question is that why is AI, when there are tens of thousands of companies around, why is so low adoption? You only have adoption of AI on the periphery, and there's a lot of talk but not a lot of adoption. So, and the other thing is that it is becoming a little bit more exclusive when we believe that it's going to be more and more ubiquitous as much as electricity. Then what is it that we need to enable everybody across the world? So, the theme for this panel discussion is simplifying AI. How do we actually make it more accessible and democratic? So the idea is the key question that we're looking from our panelists to answer is, what is the most complex problem that needs to be resolved to increase the adoption of AI? How do we make AI accessible to non-STEM people so that they can participate in the development and not just the consumption of AI? And how do we engage business leaders in participating in AI discussions to solve their own problems? And I would like to invite Renita to come up first and talk about her experiences.
Great. Thank you, Sudeep. So I'm going to focus on the question of what is the most complex problem to be resolved to increase adoption of AI. and that is irrational humans. So it doesn't matter how brilliant or powerful your tools are, if you don't address human nature first, you're not going to get the results you want. So the first thing to understand and to really internalize is that people see change as a threat. Not in just some kind of abstract way, but they literally experience it as a threat to their survival. So they will go into survival mode. And now with the world being so volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous, what you might hear this acronym VUCA, people now are in a high state of alert on a regular basis. So for many of them, their main focus is self-protection on a daily basis. Not so much from physical danger, but from what we're understanding now, they have threats in their social environment. So threats to their status, their sense of standing in the group, belonging to a group, their autonomy or sense of control. All these things people experience as an actual survival threat. So they don't want to feel stupid. They don't want to feel like they don't understand. They don't want to make mistakes or get it wrong or make a decision that's going to have a negative impact. All of these things we experience as a threat to our survival. On top of that, people are already overwhelmed. They're busy. So anytime you're trying to get them to change, it feels like another threat to their survival, or there's just inertia around the change. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling this sort of tech fatigue with all the updates and the upgrades, and my phone keeps reminding me that I could set up shortcuts, and I just don't care. I don't want to save the time or the energy if it's going to take a lot of energy to figure out first. So in survival mode, it's really important to understand that people are not necessarily behaving rationally. They may be saying rational things like, oh, we don't have the budget yet, or I need to speak to the board about that. But inside, they're coming from a place of fear very often when it's something that's unknown. And the biggest mistake that I see people making is people who are trying to integrate technology, to get people to adopt technology, is they come in and they make very rational arguments. They try to persuade and convince. This is going to be so efficient. This is going to help you innovate and make more money. And they don't address really the human emotional component, which is decision makers are thinking about all the uncomfortable things that they're going to have to do. They're going to have to stand in front of the board and take a risk. Or all those technical conversations where they're not going to understand things, they're going to feel stupid, or maybe they'll have to fire people and then they won't be liked by the group. And so the first step is always to make people feel safe. Whether you're talking to the leaders, decision makers, to the end users, we need to meet them where they're at, not where we think they should be. We can't just charge in with a solution. This is not an efficient process. It's going to take a lot of patience. So when I work with clients, I really help them understand first the stakeholders' point of view, put them in their shoes so they can see what the world looks like from their vantage point. And so there are 3 strategies that we can use to move people to action. And the first one is to be curious. Not in a, I'm going to ask a bunch of questions so then I can persuade them what to do kind of way, but to really just come from a place of wanting to understand what's going on with people. So if you're talking to leaders, to ask them, what are your concerns? What are you afraid is going to happen or not going to happen? What are potential roadblocks for this? To really understand where they're coming from. And for users to understand, how did you adopt the technology that you're already using? So to understand, to get some clues on how you might help them adopt technology going forward. The second strategy is to normalize this, to make them understand that it's okay to not understand, to be afraid, to feel stupid. Tell stories of other brilliant, smart leaders who were also overwhelmed, also confused, and how they overcame that to adopt new technology. use metaphors and analogies to tie references into what they're already doing, whether it's voice recognition with Siri or GPS, or tie it into things that they already know, so that they see that AI isn't this totally foreign, monolithic technology. And then the third step is to micro-size, what I call thinking big, but starting small with tiny micro steps. Because their first goal is not integration of new technology, it's to break through that inertia. Not just the physical inertia of all the legacy technology and the systems that are in place, it's the emotional inertia of that feeling of all the decisions they're going to have to be making. So find that one place where you can get in with a micro shift, whether it's starting with a test, whether it's identifying the people who are most excited about the technology. That is our responsibility. And so finally, I want to make a really important distinction between being simplistic, which is glossing over all the technology and how difficult this is going to be, the human aspect, and to focus on simplifying, which is really clarifying what's important in any moment. And what I found is clarity is the best antidote to fear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Renita. It was wonderful. I think it brings to life, the complexity and as well as, the kind of clarity that is required to make, the breakthrough that is required. So very quickly, moving on to Jenny. Jenny, do you want to start, and do you want me to project your slides?
Sure. Let's start with this first slide. Very insightful talk, Renita. I'm going to approach it from a little bit of a different angle. So I started a new day to help large corporations adopt exponential technologies like AI. So my background has been always for Fortune 100 companies. So I'm taking the perspective of how do large corporations understand, adopt, and really become AI first. So the first question, Sudeep, if you could do maybe the second slide.
Give me a second. Yeah.
Sorry, I could have
just making sure the technology is working on the right way.
Sure.
Okay, I just make sure.
And I think simplifying AI is really such an important topic. So, great job, Sudeep, to bring us all together to talk about this. So it seems like the second slide is showing on my end, just half of it, though. I don't see the full slide.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out this technology always stumps us. Give me a second. Let me see if I can do something better. Give me a second.
Maybe I could just.
Can you see that? Can you see the slide now? Is it still showing halfway through?
Yeah, I still see half of it. It's cut off at the right side.
Okay, maybe it's the PDF that is not coming up. I think it's best you talk it through.
Sure.
Yeah.
Could you scroll up a little bit so we can see the first half of the deck?
Is it better in this view?
The top half is cut off. Maybe you just scroll. Oh, great. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. I hope everyone else can see it.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so just a different viewpoint on the most complex problems to solve with AI adoption. So I think that whenever we're introduced with new technology, there's this continuum of complexity. Now, what does that mean? So there are different layers for how we understand and ultimately adopt, right? So the first layer is familiarity. And this is really about education. How do I educate myself on what augmented reality is, what AI is, and obviously in the case of AI, there are other subtopics, right? Machine learning, deep learnings, all sorts of types of things. So familiarity is certainly a complex problem to solve because AI can be quite esoteric, particularly in the context within which I've seen it out in the business space or in the technology space. And then from a large corporation standpoint, first, you would want to understand it, educate yourself on it, but who owns this? If you're a company with 30,000 employees or 300,000 employees, who's responsible for owning AI? And lastly, the AI has two prerequisites, right? Data and digital transformation. But when you're trying to build and adopt AI, it really changes your culture, because AI is centered on data, and a lot of cultures aren't really focused on data-first cultures. It's product-centric cultures or political cultures, or maybe a mix of the two. So I think in terms of complexity, complexity to increase AI adoption, you have this first layer: familiarity, ownership, and data-first culture. Then when it comes to actually applying AI, data, which everyone talks about as the new oil, it's quite surprising to see how many companies actually don't capture data, don't have a central data strategy. So that would be one of the first complex problems to solve, because if you're not currently capturing data, that's a challenge. Second, if you are, probably you may be capturing data from a variety of different sources. I mean, I come from legacy industries, banking, where if you're a product of mergers and acquisitions, how do you have a central data repository, and how do you have a 360-degree view of all of your data? And then when you really start to peel the onion, the questions that people start to ask is, okay, what questions are we trying to answer? We have all of this data. What do I do with it? What question do I want this data to answer? And this might seem simple, but it is exceedingly complex, particularly if you're a product-centered company. You're not used to having so much data. You don't quite really know what to do. Okay, so I know I want all of my data. I know I want it all to be in one place. What do I want to do with it? And what techniques do I apply? Because there's, the saying garbage in, garbage out. It rings very true for AI. And so what techniques do you use? And so this is the second continuum that I see. So actually being able to adopt AI, there's the complexity with data, what to do with it, like what questions to answer, and then the techniques. And then the third layer, let's say you're really trying to say, okay, I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I've got religion, I'm on board with AI, but where do I actually start? I've already been trained on AI, I have, attended all of these executive training camps, my team is on board, but where do I actually start? I mean, what's NLP? What's computer vision? I mean, I just know that I have a loss component that's really high, or I just know that my supply chain is messed up, or I just know, from a business standpoint, very functional types of questions. And then when you marry that with techniques like NLP and all sorts of things, you just don't know how to put them together. So I think from a business standpoint, where to start once you're fed this information kind of at a base level, you don't know really what to do with it, where to begin. And let's say that you've overcome that path. The last point in this continuum is really measuring value creation. Let's say that you managed to put everything together, you have a central data repository, you know what your pilot is focused on, you know that you're focusing on supply chain, for example, or risk or fraud. How do you measure value creation? Because AI is an investment. Data collection is an investment, working with various pilots and vendors is an investment, but how do you actually measure the value that's created? I mean, we are running a business, so at the end of the day, ROI is important. So to sum up on this slide, I have a 3-layer view of the complexity to solve with AI adoption. It's very similar to what I see with digital transformation, because you have multiple layers. First is, how do you understand the technology? Then what do you do with the technology? And once you know what to do with it, how do you measure what it did for you? So that's kind of how I see this first question. Could we go to the second slide, Sydney? What I'll touch on next on the second slide is how to engage leaders in adopting AI. So I have 4 tips for you guys, and I think there are a variety of different ways to do this. The way that I'm approaching this, or the way that I kind of see this this question, is really around data science versus AI. So I think the data science that we think about can sometimes be a little bit science fiction, flying cars and drones and computers reading messages and text and things of that nature. But a lot of times too, data science can be a form of, or is a form of AI. And a lot of times too, what I see with 80% of the companies that I work with and I talk with, most of the time, they're not really ready to do full-on AI, nor do they really need to do full-on AI. Sometimes it's just a matter of basic data science. The other thing to think about that is, we don't want to adopt a technology just because it's cool and it looks great. We really want to measure, is the juice worth the squeeze? So from an ROI standpoint, certain investments in AI can be a little bit more than you actually need. A lot of times it starts off with just basic data science. And this is something that leaders can understand because we're quantifying investments, we're quantifying supply and demand, we're quantifying bottom line impact. And so this is kind of my view on how to engage them, is to make that distinction between data science and AI and to show the link with ROI. The second thing is, with anything new and shiny, I think that truly there is a PR play. Like, I think in the media, there is a ton of content around AI and, the hype or the hope. So I think that there is that already, and I think that that's what makes leaders quite interested in AI. But I think that the PR play also needs to happen in-house. So if the leaders are on board, how do you get the rest of line management on board? What I saw in my time with digital transformation is you had this gap between the executives and the line managers, so people who are director level, VP level, who really were under the whole halo effect of it, but because they're responsible for actually moving the needle and moving the building blocks to make this happen, there was that gap there. The links were not being made between the two levels. And I think this PR play, I call it PR play, but really it's about education. It's about providing tools and guides and resources and information, has to go from both the top down and the bottom up. The third tip is to make it real. So I think that AI tends to be talked about in a very abstract way, which in some ways kind of makes sense to me because AI is such a broad term. It's just like saying human resources. It's so broad. So when we talk about AI, it's really we're not talking about one single technology. We're not talking about one single industry. We're actually talking about a layered industry or layered technologies, multiple technologies on top of each other that we just culled together to find patterns and make predictions. So I think we need to find a way to make this real to the leaders and to the line staff and the managers who are making a company work. And how do we make it real? We'll build a sandbox. So building a sandbox can be as simple as a task force. It can be as simple as a brainstorming team. And how do we build these sandbox across different verticals? Whether that's a functional vertical, meaning a risk sandbox, a legal sandbox, a marketing sandbox. The purpose of the sandbox is to talk about what problems do we have that we think we can solve. And obviously it can't be every single problem because there is criteria to make AI actionable, right? It has to be repetitive, it has to be cost intensive, or not, doesn't have to be cost intensive, but it does have to be repetitive. There has to be a ton of data around it. So how do you create this sandbox within which people ideate on the problems, and then later on we can match the solution for that problem? And many times the solution could be an AI solution, and many times it couldn't be. And then build usable frameworks. Again, this is just a way to help people adopt AI tools to solve the problems that are best suited to these AI tools. So speaking of tools, everybody might want to screenshot this page. So I wanted to share with you a couple of the tools that we're building over at A New Day. The first is this guide. So it's a 20-page report. Don't worry, it was primarily graphics, but it's really our attempt to make the AI sandbox more understandable, really, to simplify AI, as Sadiq mentioned. So how do we make AI actionable for leaders? We built a couple of frameworks within this guide. We talked to experts, so we interviewed a few experts who have been in the AI space for a while. We've also listed some vendors that we feel are best suited for certain tasks, and so really tried to make it approachable. The second thing is we do have a few guides on the resources backslash. And then lastly, feel free to check out the LinkedIn page as well, or email me if you have any questions about, I can point you to certain directions, a couple of books that I've seen around that, but hopefully these would be helpful for you.
Sorry, I think there's, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I think we're kind of running out of time on this one. So we'll quickly move on to Son. Son, do you want to talk about next?
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay. Let me know you saw the screen.
Yes, we can see your screen, Son.
Yeah. So I want to share about some story about how myself involved in the summer project to pushing the AI to the market for the few customer in the few industry, and it needs to be fast, right? So the time to market is very important. Let me go to the first case. This is for the media for the new industry. So in this case, the customer, they set up of we did something really quick and something good for the reader. Make sure that they can experience the accent from the few area in Vietnam. So you saw on the screen this is a new paper. This is one of my clients. They apply the computer vision, and they need something the very flexible option for the text to speak, and it's a very successful after they launched. They launched about a few months ago in Vietnam. It can the reader, they can pick the female, they can pick the male. So this is a very good use case to show to the market about how AI can helping and create the news scenario. This is just the use case for the news for the media industry. Computer vision, text to speak, speech to text can apply in the many other industry like in MSI. I have one customer, they apply for the chatbot, helping reduce the number of headcount for the contact center to support the customer. The another one I want to share is also very interesting. This is a Soso in Vietnam, but this Soso they focus on the very specific area for the food. So they try to build a network for the food lover. They come together, they're sharing the information, and later on they after they collect enough information, they want to work together with the provider like a Grab or the Coupon. So they provide exchange point, something like that. So to make it happen, they need to build the AI in the background to make sure that they can reach the user experience. They can also collect enough data to suggestion the right advertisement, and also the right food to the user based on their favorite, based on their behavior and experience. So that is a very success, and they deployment in less than 6 months. And the reverse case. So if my client, they want to go quick, so I always suggestion they should using some package solution or the quicker solution to build the AI. In that case, the personalization. So they're using on one of the top cloud platform provider. And the last one I want to share is the very famous customer, Lobo customer. But when they apply in Vietnam, it is very challenging because the data is not so clean, because when you want to apply AI, the data source is very important. So it's a very fragmented data from the ERP, from the very different kind of source. So after a while, they checking out the few solution, and then they decide that they want to simplify the solution with the SaaS model. So in the picture you saw they're using the forecasting, the forecast product from the very popular cloud provider. So in that case, after the less than 5 months, after they decide to pick the different approach for AI, they saw the huge benefits with the AI deployment. They can forecast the sale revenue faster. Before that, they did so bad, and you know that in FMCG industry, if you can improve the supply chain, so that you can increase the profit. So in that case, they have a better forecast about the sale revenue, so that they can improve better for the supply chain system, and that is a fantastic result. So this is all from me, Sudeep.
Thank you very much, Son. It was wonderful and very insightful. We understand the kind of use cases that AI has been applied to, and Vietnam is moving forward with AI and using cloud as a kind of a provider for driving some of these technologies. So let me also share some of my point of view before I move on to the next speaker. I think it is maybe kind of a summary of what you guys have already been saying, as well as a few of my own thoughts. So that's the first bit that I wanted to talk about. That we are first thing about AI is about there's a lot of mystique. There's a lot of mystery about AI. What is it? AI. What comes to mind when you hear the word AI? Is it this? Is it this? Or maybe some people think about this. And then if you are mathematically, involved and you understand algorithms, it's about this. Now, AI, if you look at all of this, AI seems to be something which is external. It is something which is threatening, which is going to take away jobs, which is going to overcome human beings, and something which can probably destroy humanity. For me, AI is not really artificial intelligence, but for me, AI stands for augmentation of identity. It is something that allows you to, think better, memorize better, see better, speak better, and learn better. When we talk about AI, we talk about algorithms and data structures and computational power. Or we talk about chatbots like Siri, Alexa, Google, and maybe, we talk about Netflix or Amazon recommendations. Now, all of this is AI, and yet AI is much more. But when we look at AI through this lens, what you think is that it's only the domain of data scientists and engineers and technologists who can become a party to AI. And you need to be able to code, to understand complex mathematics, and to be able to participate in AI. At least this is the definition that the big 6 technology companies are circulating around the world. And to a certain extent, the world seems to believe it, When I looked at it, I felt it is too complex and it is too exclusive. AI needs to be simple to understand, to consume, to build upon, to share, maybe to sell, and to engage. Now, we talk a lot about, Andrew, who is very famous for his Google DeepMind, and he's the founder of Coursera. And he goes on and says that AI is the new electricity. Now, which means that AI is going to be everywhere. Like 100 years ago, where electricity was, AI is going to be there in the same space. So I just want to continue with the same metaphor. I want to take you 150 years back in the 1870s, when the electricity was becoming more accessible. There were 2 different standards of electricity, the DC and the AC. The DC compatible machines did not work with the AC compatible machines, and they were competing with each other to become the standard. Today, we have the same issue, There's a Google AI versus a Facebook AI versus a Microsoft AI versus an IBM AI. They're all offering you services for free, but their services don't work with each other seamlessly. Your data is the energy that fuels them, and you're tied to them and relying upon them to provide you the next best thing in AI to solve your problems. If you're not a STEM graduate, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics graduate, it is very unlikely that you will be able to participate on any of these platforms. And even if you are, you need to learn coding and programming to make something of, of AI or of machine learning. Think about it, if you're a business owner and wondering how to leverage AI in the business, you are reliant on your technologists to bring it to life for you. But there's little role that you can play other than opening the purse strings for a bottomless pot to be drawn by others. All you need to, all when you are required to meet your quarterly targets with your shareholders, and your decisions are being closely monitored by analysts, ethicists, and socialists and all. So what you do is basically a lip service to AI. And then pass a less large-scale adoption to the next quarter and then the next. For me, to enable the adoption of AI at mass scale, it will need to overcome the trust barrier. It will not be a black box where all of the data goes in and insights comes out, which may or may not be fully in sync with what a human individual or collective experience is believing. In such a case, the AI will need to become more explainable at all steps. But as far as we know, most of the AI which is being built around us is being built as a black box model, the neural networks and stuff that is talking about, which is it ingests a lot of data, consumes a lot of data from a variety of sources, regresses them, plays around with them and using complex algorithms and comes up with a probabilistic answer. And when you look about it this way, the question becomes, who do you trust? It's a question that needs to be answered. For example, if you are a cancer detection algorithm, it is touted to be doing 50% better job than all humans, any human that doctor would be there. But think about it. Would you be able to walk into a room to be told by a machine that you need another round of chemotherapy? Now, the language the data scientists use, they say if there's a false positive and you did not need one chemotherapy session and you went for another one, you are exposed, that your immunity comes down, and in this kind of COVID situation, it could be deadly. And the false negative is that you need one and you did not get one, and thereby bringing you one step closer to the death. So here, you would want a human to make a decision, and you would not expect any human to point out a finger and say, I did it because the machine told me to do so. I mean, if something, God forbid, happened to you, would your family accept that you died because the doctor pointed his machine to pointed his finger to a machine? So those are the kind of questions that experience, that is challenging the adoption of AI. On the contrary, if you ever walked into a clinic and walked into a doctor's chamber and saw, I'm being a little bit stereotypical, but a middle-aged man with a balding on the sides and wearing a white lab coat with a stethoscope hung around his neck, and you've never seen him before, and tells you that you need another round of chemotherapy, would you accept it? My guess is that the context and the structure in which you met the person will enable you to trust it. And while it's the same setting, the machine will be subject to a lot of questions. Therefore, I feel that it's too early for the AI, which is being touted around as a savior, to get accepted and trusted. So what do we need to do? We need to make it simple. We need to simplify it. We need to make it smaller by breaking it down into smaller modules, something a normal person can comprehend, explain the functionality of each module, and be able to connect them much like Lego blocks so that we can explain what is happening in each step. If something is not right in a particular step, then you are able to change that step, upgrade that step, or discard that step altogether. Now, what does it do? It brings explainability, transparency, and understanding, and thereby can cross the trust barrier little by little. Once you understand a whole flow, it can be bundled into a single offering, which can then be utilized as a component of something bigger, but with components which are trusted at every level. Now, by explaining the functionality of each module, the language a common person can understand, by enabling a simple user interface for dragging and dropping and connecting these modules, we can enable non-STEM graduates and common folks who may or may not have any kind of formal education to play in this. It will bring about a revolution of innovation, which will be stifled only if we rely on STEM graduates to provide all the answers. Now, I'm not saying that there is no need for any more technologists or any more large service providers. They all have a role to play, but it is about making innovation more and more more and more available for innovation. So by allowing people from various backgrounds to, from various skills to come, and with various motives to come and make it, make AI together, we'll make it AI more democratic, more accessible, and more transparent. And if you look at the picture on your screen, these are not the most qualified people, but they have built up innovations which are utilizing. As long as you can put the right tools in the right place, we allow the human creativity to actually foster, you would be unlocking a whole new world of innovation, and which is powered by AI. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you. Right. And I would like to invite Theo, who would talk about more of his invention. Theo, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure thing. Hello, everyone, wherever you are, and thank you, Sudeep, for your. In a way, I very much agree with what the way you approach things and how you presented the problem that we're facing. it seemed like you kind of describe what you do here with Hero. So it's a very nice segue into what we do here, because we very much believe into democratizing AI, like really democratizing it. And to go back a bit at the questions for the panel, what is the most complex problem that needs to be solved to increase adoption of AI? I would say we should not think about adoption of AI. What we should be thinking about is what problems are suddenly solvable with AI right now that are not possible to solve before. So that is, AI is just one tool of many. And another thing we should be looking at is cost, because another great man said that things do not change when technologies become possible. Big shifts occur when technologies become cheap. And I think we're exactly on that cusp. And it's an important moment for mankind. And I think, and also going back to some of the questions here, how do we engage the business leaders? I think we have to follow the money, because we'll always follow the money. If we try to just do stuff for the sake of it, it will die out. We have to follow the money, and then the business leaders will follow the money 100%, because this is what we've been doing for the last, 6,000 years. So I will present what we're trying to do here at WizHero. We're very much democratizing AI in as much as we are enabling normal sports coaches to come to our platform and download their coaching expertise, and then we will serve it at scale to million scale students. I will turn off my video because the site will need my video, and then I'll share my screen. WizHero window, okay. And this is our main landing page. And once we are here, we can, for example, practice our warrior with the help of the system. And I will go in, please work. And here all of a sudden, we have the computer looking at me. It's already identifying my skeleton, like my elbows, my shoulders, my eyes. And it will also, as I get up, and it will identify, just a second, it's not, lower it down to see me better. So all of a sudden it will start seeing me in 3 dimensions. You can see there is myself in 3 dimensions in a skeleton, and the computer is already trying to figure out what I'm doing. And if I start doing yoga, the computer thinks, I'm doing yoga, good job, I'm in the correct position. If I make a mistake, see if I make a mistake, right. So it's so that I'm making a mistake, and it's here that we are closing the wisdom circle, so to say. It saw that I'm making a mistake. What was that mistake? Which helps a lot, but does not help as much as prescribing a remedy. The remedy, I have to practice the downward facing dog, and then there's a video link here that will take me to the a lesson of the downward facing dog. And so what we're doing here with the help of AI, we are changing knowledge into wisdom, because wisdom is knowledge applied at the right time, right place, in response to the right action. And this is the circle that we're closing. And I think this is the big, going back to the panel question, I think this is the big possible thing that we can do now with AI. We can all of a sudden distribute wisdom at scale, because 500 years ago we started, let me make this bigger and go back to the video. 500 years ago we started democratizing knowledge. We invented the printing press, and all of a sudden the books are not the privilege of kings and the rich guys, and everyone could more or less buy a book. And now the wisdom is similarly privileged. If I, it costs a lot to go to an expert human and get wisdom, like from a doctor. You go to a doctor, you get a diagnostic and a remedy. But it costs money. In the US, it's very expensive. For example, you don't have time. You need to go to an accountant. You need to go to a sports coach. And this is how our innate human need for wisdom manifests. We don't say, oh, we need wisdom today, I'll go and buy some. We go to the doctor to get a diagnostic and a remedy. And all of a sudden, these days, with the help of cheap AI, we can make this wisdom available at scale democratically. And to go to the democratic bit, we saw how a student would interact with it, which is, but we also, AI will help us fulfill the other side of if you're on the AI wisdom pipeline, which is an instructor arriving here and telling the system, with the help of AIs, of course, telling the AI teams how we're training the AI teams. It'd be like how you train, you get a very clever employee in your company, and they're all very good, but you need to train him in the ways your company works. So this is the same thing. We have this very clever system here, but as an instructor, I want to train him to do things the way I'm used to doing them. Because, in instructing sports and instructing most things, there's little right, there's definitely right or wrong. What's the best way of doing stuff in one style is like a big no-no in another style, and so on. So I definitely need to train the AI to do things my way, because that's the way I want it. So for this here we can, it's a very simple interface. It's just loading videos, loading photographs, and moving a few sliders around. Let's say this channel. We can create our own channel here, and then once we're in the channel, we can. This is the one that we played around with earlier. We can go inside, and we can put poses or skills in there. Or we can, warrior 1, warrior 2. We can add another one. We can say, okay, that's warrior 3. How we're doing with time? Sudeep.
Yeah, we're okay. We're okay. We just need to move on quickly. Couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So we're at 3. Let's see here. Okay. And we're waiting for it to work. Right. So, and all of a sudden we have a warrior 3 pose that we just did. And then we can add the mistakes for it. What's important here is that we can select various root causes, because every mistake has got a root cause. And then me as an instructor, I think, right, according to my experience, the root cause for a wrong warrior 3 would be, let's say, like low rear leg. This would be the mistake. It's most probably weak calf muscle and equal, like slightly lower probability of weak core. And then here we put a mistake of I don't think I have one. Okay, I'll put any. It's not strictly a mistake, but I will pretend it's a mistake. So all of a sudden we have a mistake here that will trigger the advice cycle. But and then this is it. I've just programmed a fully AI system with no knowledge of AI, and actually there's no word saying AI on the whole site. If you look, I just put pictures, sliders, put a few descriptions, and yes, there are lots of AI work in the background processing all this. For example, here we can see the 3D skeleton. Maybe not this one. Okay, 5 minutes. So we can see the 3D skeletons processed in the background. This is a bent back leg in a different pose. So yeah, there is a lot of AI work in the background, but it's all in the background. There's nothing saying AI on it, and no one needs to, there's not even any need to code. So this is in short the way we approach this somewhat intractable problem. We identify this kind of cost point, which is at the moment we can automatize wisdom and really assist people, and AI is the big enabler in that one. We appreciate. Well, thank you so much for your attention. I hope it helped. We made a good contribution, and thank you so much, Sudhi, for organizing this. Great idea.
Thank you so much, Leo. I think it brings the AI bit to life. The bit that we're talking about. That yes, AI needs to be simple, and you've demonstrated with your product how it can be simple without even the using word AI anywhere. It's all fueled by AI, and it's available and accessible to people who have nothing to do with AI. But I would like to call on the other end of the spectrum, Nick, who is basically, he's got companies in AI who's building it. So it's very important that we make the distinction that we have a role for people to adopt, but at the same time, there is a whole lot of role for people who are actually building this. So Nick, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentations, everyone. Really impressive. Just looking at my notes, it seems that most of you have sort of addressed a lot of the points that I was going to bring up. So I'll try and sort of adapt as I go, so as not to repeat everything you've just said. So I'm going to actually answer all three questions as within 7 minutes, if possible. So the first question that you posed, Sudeep, and all three are great questions, is what is the most complex problem that needs to be resolved to increase the adoption of AI? So you can read that question two ways. One is at the consumer level, but I am approaching this more from a corporate level, right? So how do we, what is the most complex problem that needs to be resolved to increase the adoption of AI by companies and the development of AI? So in a nutshell, for me, it's really a lack of understanding, and a lack of understanding about numerous things with regards to AI. But the three that sort of jump out the most for me is a lack of understanding about the process. Right, what is the process of developing AI? And to Sudeep's comments, it really isn't a coding problem. It's not like other software where it's very much about you write the spec, you can predict what's going to happen, you write the code, you know what's going to work. There's very few moving parts. You'd be amazed how many Fortune 500 C-level execs I speak to that think that AI is plug and play. So number one is let's demystify and let them understand what the process is. Two is to educate them or to sort of elucidate on the issue of the results and the benefits that result from the deployment and employment of artificial intelligence. And then thirdly, a hugely important subject is the ethics around AI. We've got to deal with privacy. We've got to deal with biases. We've got to deal with how to produce better data. And it amazes me how many times we have a conversation about data, and it's like as if the data magically appeared, and then your data scientists have to pre-process it, make sense of it, and then that gets fed into a model. But if you rewind a little bit earlier, who's actually producing the data? It's us humans. Through our behavior, the footprint we leave is the data. So you hear criticism about certain companies' HR screening tool that has biases, racial biases, gender biases, and it's the systems that are blamed and it's the developers that are blamed. But who produced the data on which those systems was trained? It's humans. So we need to understand that we as humans have a moral responsibility to produce better data, and AI will then take care of itself. So that addresses the first question. I'm going to jump to the third one, Sudeep, if you don't mind, rather than take them in order. But the question is, how do we engage business leaders in participating in AI discussions to solve their problems? So if the problem is a lack of understanding, clearly the solution is education, right? You've got to educate business leaders on the benefits of AI. And I think by far the biggest is if they understand that it's going to help their teams, it's going to enhance, augment, enable their teams to do better work. It's about their people who they're ultimately responsible for. You treat your people right, everything else takes care of itself, right? So AI, robots eventually can do the menial, dangerous, repetitive, boring tasks to free humans to do what they're really good at, which is be creative, be able to strategize, have empathy, etc. That's what we should be doing, and having AI free us to do that. Thirdly, I think that educating them on the process is important, but it's not necessarily the most important thing, because as I'll sort of discuss in a second, the process will evolve, it will change. Today, it is very much a complex, detailed process with many moving parts, but it's going to evolve into a simpler process over time. And I think that the whole mission of simplifying and democratizing AI is extremely noble and very important. The other thing that I think they need to be educated on is not necessarily how to sort of go to university and study computer science and mathematics, linear algebra, calculus, etc., and then go and be able to build AI applications. It's up to us as developers to develop modularly, to create AI with modules that, to use a word that Sudeep and I often use, create Lego blocks and help them understand how to piece those Lego blocks together to be able to build something that seems very complex, but ultimately has been simplified through this sort of modular development approach. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a second as well, if time allows. But finally, the other thing that they need to be educated about, business leaders need to be educated about, is the consequences. So to Tio's point, absolutely, there is a profit imperative. Ultimately, you are responsible to your shareholders for generating revenue, profits, etc. Your competitors are going to wake up to the benefits of AI. They are going to start developing AI before you. And that leads to a loss of relevance. You become obsolete, and therefore there is an existential threat. And I think that business leaders, related to the consequences, need to get out of ostrich mode. We have a moral obligation to get involved. AI will happen. It'll happen without us. But we have a duty and responsibility to step up and participate and ensure that the AI we are building and the data we're creating, etc., is for the good of everyone involved, for all stakeholders. And we cannot, it's like not voting. Not voting is voting, right? You cannot put your head in the sand in this context. There's a responsibility, and I think it does, to a large extent, need to be enforced, that they need to participate more and play a role. One of the panelists spoke about a bottom-up and a top-down approach, and I very, very much agree with that. So it's got to come from both sides. So the second question that was asked is, how do we make AI accessible to non-STEM people so they can participate in the development and not just the consumption of AI? So I'll break it up into three phases, if you will. So look at how AI should be deployed today and how AI is being created today. Let's face it, it's not just about coding. We've built many systems. I would actually venture to say that the coding bit is probably one of the smaller steps. You've got to define the outcome. You've got to define the problem you're solving. You've got to look at the data. You've got to generate data. You've got to clean your data. You have to look at all the ethical issues that flow from that. Ensure that none of our human biases make their way into the AI bias. And then you've got to test what you build. You've got to train it if there's a reinforcement element and a supervision element. And in many cases, you should be involving employees, customers, other stakeholders. So from that, you can see it's not just about coding, and it shouldn't be. And that's not to say that developers and scientists aren't going to have a role. I think they're going to have a bigger and bigger role. But you're going to see this move away of the STEM stuff, let's call it that, becoming more and more complex, but becoming transparent to the people that are building. So that, somebody once said a true genius can explain something in language that a 5 or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old can understand. And I think that very much applies. So the complexity needs to be there, but it needs to be user transparent, and it needs to be hidden so that we don't need to deal with it necessarily. So through abstraction, through modularity, you're able to more easily create solutions. If you fast forward into the future, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I believe that building an AI system will be as simple as beginning a conversation with an AI development bot. And you'll say, bot, I want to solve this problem. This is the data I have at my disposal. This is the data we could potentially create. And this is the outcome that I want to achieve. And through a process of natural language conversation, you'll be able to have a system that is fully functional on its own. So if you look at the evolution of programming languages, I mean, I don't know if any of you code, but if you've coded at the machine language level and then C, and as you move up the stack, you're abstracting more and more. The ultimate abstraction is getting to natural language, and I think we will get there eventually. But what do we do in the interim? So Lego blocks, for me, is the way to do it. Develop modularly, roll out these Lego blocks in a way that it's very easy for executives and anyone in a company to very quickly build proofs of concept, rapid prototypes, and within days literally be able to deploy something in a sandbox initially, see how it works, test its efficacy, sort of analyze the ethical related issues, and if it works, find a path to then deploy that at scale throughout the organization, throughout the department, et cetera, And I'll sort of wrap up by saying that, let's be realistic, that's going to happen always at a narrow level. So it's very difficult to build a series of modules that can solve every single problem. AI today is narrow. It's going to remain narrow for the foreseeable future, but ultimately we will get to a solution where you're able to build almost any AI system purely through conversation.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was wonderful. Very insightful. And I know that's a small step that we're taking towards simplification. And yes, there are many minds to grow. So I'd like to invite Professor Maheshwari to come in with his thoughts. Coming from an academic background, and also he's been in the corporate for a while. So just want to look at how we want to bring in.
Yeah, so wonderful insights, and I was noting down some of the ideas, and I think many of the ideas I will also talk about. I think towards the end, Nick, you talked about how it will get more complicated, but it has to be explained well to an 8-year-old or some 8th grader. And this whole idea, Sudeep, you talked about unboxing the AI, and I think Jenny spoke about AI changes your culture, and Anita, you talked about how to clarify it for everybody, and Theo, I loved your idea of what can we not do, what should we do that we cannot do without AI. So all of those are very important elements of what we need to think about as we move ahead. Now the thing was simplify, right? And who said simplify first? I think it was this guy. I don't know if you can see him.
Yeah. Henry David Thoreau.
Henry David Thoreau, and he was a transcendentalist, right? And he learned from the Vedas. And so he said, he said, simplify, simplify. And he said it in the 1850s. About a century later, another transcendentalist, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, made the whole of Vedas accessible to the current generation. And he would answer any question in one word or one sentence, and then elaborate on it for as long as is needed. So I call it the wholeness outwards model. Get the wholeness and then just detail out. And in the current tech world, there is an example like that. I would say Steve Jobs. He was a master at simplifying. You remember his Think Different campaign in 1997. It was such a simple and beautiful way of distinguishing his brand. So this is where, how do we get to the core of it? So I would, yes, I'm an academic. I've been in industry also for 20 years. But so let's begin with the basics. What is intelligence? We talk of AI. So, what is intelligence? I think it's a 150-year-old term to describe and measure mental capacity. And it has been described in many ways, the capacity for logic, for understanding, for creativity, for critical thinking, problem solving, self-awareness, planning, knowledge, everything else. So there are many, many measurable intelligences, such as emotional intelligence, musical intelligence, athletics, spiritual. Howard Gardner had his multiple intelligence theory. There's also actually non-human intelligence. There is animal intelligence, there's plant intelligence. The Vedas would say everything is intelligence. In fact, natural law is the total and ultimate intelligence. Well, if that is so, then what is artificial intelligence? I would imagine it's synthetic intelligence in some way or the other. New synonym is cognitive computing. I guess that's why it's called CogX at conference. Machine learning is a branch of AI, but so is language recognition, so is computer vision and other things. It's a very fertile area for expansion and growing in capability. Deep learning has a certain self-learning capability. So if it can organize its learning, can't it organize its own explanation? Possibly so. And Mark Cuban, who made money, in the early days of internet, he said the one who can explain AI will be the next trillionaire, the first trillionaire of this world. So again, once again, I want to congratulate Sudeep for assembling 8 of us to provide different perspectives, and we have heard beautiful perspectives from different things that we do. And like an Indian parable, we are 7 or 8 people in describing the elephant, the AI, in our own different ways. And the description depends upon our point of view. I'll describe it from a transcendentalist angle or a consciousness angle. What is consciousness? The hard problem, consciousness. How does we become aware of ourselves? So that's what consciousness is, self-awareness. Consciousness is aware of itself. It is a knower, it's the process of knowing, and it is the known. It is the 3-part multiplicity of the commonness called consciousness. So I will apply these 3 aspects to simplifying AI. Let's start with the knower perspective, the person. So first we need to explain what is AI in the simplest of terms, right? We can say it is digitally or computationally simulating our sense organs and minds, maybe to provide us with additional eyes or additional ears or additional minds. And I'm using here the Steve Jobs persuasion model, who would say build new on top of the familiar. Elon Musk is actually very articulate about describing AI, and he's got a good grasp of it. And he thinks AI presents an existential threat to humanity once it gets to general intelligence. The fear of dominance by AGI is very real for everybody, and that needs to be addressed when we think of simplifying. A second view would be the process view, and here I will delve a little bit into academics. In information systems area, one of the major theories is called technology acceptance model. How do technologies get adopted inside an organization? So it says information system usage, and AI is an information system of some kind. It depends on 2 factors. perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. Both are perceptions. So you can see action, the actual usage depends on perception, because there are political implications of using it. There's power equation. When AI or even CAT scan technologies get implemented in organizations, let's say CAT scan in hospitals, the power equation between the techies and the doctors changes. When AI gets implemented in an organization, the power equation between the executives and the salespeople and the tech people will also change. So there will be change coming in the organization. Power equation will shift. And I'll just tell you another example of email. You know, we are all, some of us are of that vintage before email really got popular. I mean, diffusion of email really happened through academics and through enthusiasts. But the actual adoption, especially in the corporate world, happened only through fiat. When the CEO's daily plan or the agenda began to be sent only by email, adoption was instantaneous. All the VPs got onto the email and then down the line. So, you know, there needs to be certain ownership. The CEO takes ownership of it, and then the implementation begins. Now let's take the third part, the product part, the physical artifact part. So, it's got all these elements of the stack. And I think, Nick, you talked about how the essential technology is getting more complicated. We want to simplify the logic and also simplify the user interface. So, but I think that logic is obviously getting more sophisticated, being able to handle more data. If you just look at some of the big products that have come about in AI, well, Deep Blue, and then IBM Watson, and then AlphaZero. I mean, these have become more and more sophisticated, and they started with gaming models, right? They were just models being created to play, but then they had practical implications. Incidentally, I was in the hall in the Equitable Life Insurance building in Manhattan watching Game 6, the last game of the match between Kasparov and Deep Blue. And it was quite a shock that he lost in such few moves. Was it 19 or something like that? So, and the logic has really gotten more and more sophisticated, and I don't know what the frontier is in terms of after Go, what would the next frontier would be. So product will get more sophisticated, but I think the interfaces such as Alexa and Duplex and Siri, they have made the interface relatively simple. So I like this plug and play idea that all of these things, chat box and other things, can be embedded in current systems to make the interface simple. And just going now within the product, but like looking at the logic part of neural networks, etc. I mean, we see that AI and this Alexa, etc. They're able to understand a complex commands and answer them effectively. And they're getting better at it. Why shouldn't they be able to explain themselves? Why, Alexa, why did you do it? Or Siri, why did you do it? Stuff like that. And I think explanations can be developed. This goes to what Sudeep, you were talking about, unboxing AI, unblackboxing AI. Just you can have a different objective function. AIs obviously operate to a certain objective function. What are you differentiating or maximizing or minimizing? Give an objective function of maximizing explainability. You can have two models. One is to maximize predictability and one to maximize explainability. And actually, it's very similar to how we human beings make decisions. We have fairly sophisticated way of absorbing many elements, but then when we explain our decision to somebody, we say, well, I did this because A and because of B, even though C was not in favor. Those 2-3 factors, we explain it. So the explainable models don't have to be very sophisticated so long as they kind of capture the gist of what is going on. So in summary, I would say AI impacts at all levels, at the person level, the process level, and the product level. And I think it'll need to be made simple and more simple and useful at all levels. Now, what is the purpose of it all? I think I like to use the idea of what can it do that we could not do before? Or if we could do before, what can it do better? So what do we want out of life? I mean, Maharishi would say the purpose of life is the expansion of happiness. We all want happiness for ourselves, for our children, for our family, and everybody. So I would like, if AI can help bring in more bliss and more peace in the world. So that would be my test of its simplicity and efficacy if AI can help make the world more blissful and peaceful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Maheshwari. I think it was very insightful. There's a lot of insights and a lot of academics as well as bringing in your experience through. And very quickly moving on to Susan. I know we are running out of time, but Susan, please feel free. We have enough time for you to make your last presentation. I would like to hear from you. Susan, did we just lose your video? Susan?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I have to kind of talk from a place a little bit different in that my background was not AI, my background was healthcare. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. If you just share your screen.
Okay, let me try again. I thought I was doing that. Sorry. Share. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, so a little bit of background about my business and our AI journey. We've been building a voice and language platform for about 12 years now. We started in hospitality. We had the first digital audio restaurant menu in the world. It's the only one that probably is ADA compliant in the United States. And my mother-in-law had a very serious medical mishap. She died, actually, due to a language miscommunication at the hospital. So we started looking at how we could use our voice and language platform for healthcare. Health literacy is a huge problem in the United States. There's 130 million people that can't even understand what's happening with the prescription bottles, let alone anything else. We have 18 million children in the United States that live in linguistically isolated families. And in addition to language, the health literacy problem is very severe. Everybody's talking about health disparities. Among African Americans, the proficient health literacy rate is around 4%. And everywhere in healthcare, we are expected to read, and not only read, but read well. So we've built this enterprise suite, and that's not the important thing. I talked to a bunch of friends when I was invited to this that were in healthcare, and a lot of these things you've already talked probably more articulately about than I can, but specifically for healthcare, the biggest thing that was expressed was there's an incredible lack of trust. They're afraid that AI is going to be responsible for a fatal error. There's some industries that if you make a mistake, you've made a mistake. And in some industries, the patient dies. They're afraid that AI is good because of who it's built by, that it's going to be biased towards a particular patient group. And they're afraid that it's going to replace staff. So there was a survey done by Intel among healthcare decision makers. 91% of them could absolutely articulate benefits of AI, but 54% were afraid of that, fatal error. I think a lack of education is extremely important. AI can't really explain a lot of times why a course of treatment is credible to a user that may not be a professor of IT, So because the machine learning algorithms are too complicated, so the average user doesn't understand. They know that a course of treatment has maybe been suggested, but they don't know why. There's also, I mean, I'm not kidding, how many people have said to me, oh, and then we build robots and they take over the world. And finally, education, in addition to everything else, it has to be very inclusive in order to mitigate bias to its applications. The example of like Watson used in oncology, it did not live up to expectations. I mean, it struggled for a long time to differentiate between specific forms of cancer. And doctors outside of the U.S. said that the treatments that were suggested were biased towards U.S. patients. And of course, Watson couldn't explain why it was recommending a course of treatment. And so that all led to, people being very, very suspicious. We have privacy issues. We're the most, probably, along with banking, the most highly regulated industry, or one of the most. The other thing that a lot of health people suggested to me is that there aren't enough people who understand AI, and it's complicated by the fact that, they brought in experts, but the experts don't understand healthcare. And so there's a communication divide that they don't necessarily know how to bridge. Nobody helps them with real roadmaps for an AI strategy, which leads to wasted time, money, and confusion. And current interfaces are not intuitive, so there's everybody saying that they're working in, they're developing some kind of AI strategy, but they're dragging their feet. So with our program, one of the things, this is our main goal now. We, of course, work in voice and language, and there is no translation engine that can accurately translate a medication reminder with perfection from one language to another. So we've built in algorithms to do that, and we can guarantee that if a medication instruction is put in English, that it's going to be communicated properly in Spanish or Hindi. And then we're working on a single patient view, and it's an ongoing strategy that's, seems to baffle us, because there are a lot of stakeholders when you're talking about a patient. Obviously, hospitals that have data, there are caregivers, there are home health care, there are doctors, there are pharmacies, there are insurance companies. So we're working on it. It's a process. We'll continue to work on it. It's probably a never-ending process, but we have quite a bit of traction because of how well we currently do. And we are the only company right now that offers, healthcare information read to the patient in the language that they understand. Both are really important. The audio is important, and the language is very important. And so the other point that I wanted to make is that I think we have to start talking to our children and grandchildren in very simple ways about AI and little problems. We don't have to necessarily solve big problems. Did everybody hear the song that was supposedly designed by Watson? So there are ways to talk to people that are not necessarily very tech savvy and still reach them. And we have to be able to tell those stories, I think. Other than that, I am extremely grateful for this session. I've learned so much. I've taken notes from all of you, and I'm going to use what I learned today to make our product better. We're on a mission to kind of save people's lives.
Thank you, Susan. I think that was wonderful. You know, it kind of built up everything that all of us have been talking, you know, from different points of views, you know, from somebody who's developing it, somebody who is, you know, aiding it, somebody who's, you know, providing the academic part of it, but you brought it together into your business and into a particular problem that you're solving for your patient. And it's a very, very noble cause, you know, trying to make, as you said, medication is something which is absolutely essential. But I would like to take a moment to thank all of you for your time and sharing your wonderful insights. I think we've taken the first steps towards simplification of AI. I would want people to get engaged and talk when we have a point of view that we have put forth, but there are more point of views. This is something which we would want to, you know, press forward as a movement that would bring together the entire simplification of AI so that it becomes more accessible, so that it becomes more democratic, and so that it becomes more reachable and transparent to everyone. But thank you very much, guys, and have a wonderful day. Yeah,
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sudeep. It was a great talk.
Bye.
Best to everyone.
Bye bye.